You are listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I am your host, Celine Yeager. Each week, I bring you advice from athletes, scientists, researchers, and other experts to help you feel and perform your best, no matter what your hormones are doing. This show is a production of Live Feisty Media. Hello, strong, feisty women. I hope you all are well. I have a real treat for you this week. I sat down with the one and only longtime professional triathlete, Dede Griesbauer, who this past November won the Ultraman World Championship on the Big Island of Hawaii by over 45 minutes, set a course record, and came in third overall at the age of 52. For those who are not familiar, Ultraman is as it sounds. It's a swim, bike, run on steroids. The competitors cover more than 500 kilometers or about 320 miles over 3 days, including a 10K or 6.2 mile swim, a 275K or 170-ish mile bike, and a freaking double marathon to wrap it all up in the end. And Dede did all of that in a cumulative time of 23 hours, 22 minutes, and 58 seconds. We talk all about how she trains and accomplishes all of that. And honestly, what I loved most about this conversation is just how brutally honest Dede is about what it takes. She, like me, hates when people say age is just a number, because it really diminishes the work and dedication it takes to deliver that kind of high performance when you are in your 50s. She also talks about how, though it can be really freaking hard, elite levels of performance are possible, and we should not put an expiration date on our dreams. If she had retired when people said she, quote unquote, should, she would never have gotten to call herself a world champion. Along with her latest achievement, Dede is a 3-time Ironman champion, a 2-time 70.3 champion, and a 12-hour time trial world champion. You can learn all about her and all of her amazing feats at dedegriesbauer.com. I hope you enjoy this one as much as I did. All right, before we get to it, remember, I have a weekly blog. It's all free, comes out every week. I distill all the latest research and what it means for you. You can get that at feistymenopause.com. Follow us at Feisty Menopause on Instagram and Facebook. Come on and join our private Hit Play Not Pause Facebook group. And if you want a deeper dive and have one-on-one time with experts like you hear on this show, we have our Level Up membership that you can come on in and join. You can learn all about that at feistymenopause.com as well. Finally, a very quick thanks to Inside Tracker for their longtime support of this show and honestly many things feisty. They have helped me get my blood sugar and my cholesterol and so many things in line, and I just really appreciate it. So thanks, Inside Tracker, for your longtime support. All right, enough of me. Let's have a few words about our awesome sponsors and get on with the show. All right, Dede, as I just mentioned to you, you are a very requested guest on this show. So I am very, very excited to talk to you. And I heard you on Fast Talk a bit ago, and that was excellent. That was a really excellent episode.
Oh, thank you. Oh, I appreciate it. Yeah, they're more I'm very good friends with Emma Kate Lidberry, who works over there, and she sort of prepped me. She's like, these are more cycling people, so the whole triathlon, she's like, it's going to be a little bit of a different thing for them, but I thought it was great. We had a lot of fun. Yeah, we had a lot of fun.
It was great. And was it Betty? What was the car's name? What was her name?
Oh, Burgundy Betty. Yes.
Burgundy Betty. I was trying to remember the color of your support vehicle.
Well, it's funny because I have like the car that I drive like at home. It's a big blue Nissan Armada, and I just nicknamed her Big Blue Betty. Which is, I mean, it's just what I called my car. I just gave her a name when I bought her, and I called her Big Blue Betty. And then I got a scooter recently that's also, it's a different shade of blue, but it's also blue. And I called her Little Blue Biddy. So when my crew was out in Hawaii, we had this crazy like burgundy sprinter van that it was like the first sprinter van ever made. Like we were seriously concerned that it wasn't actually going to make it around the island, that we were going to have to push the vehicle up the volcano. Like she had some personality, and my crew nicknamed her Burgundy Betty. Yeah.
I love that. I loved it so much. And pumping up the tires with a bike pump. Like,
Oh, I know. Can you believe it? I know the things they went through. Like I thought I had it rough out there. They had a tough time.
so for anyone who doesn't know what we're talking about, you just won, set the course record, and I believe came in third overall, correct?
Yes,
At
that's correct.
your That's so awesome. At your first Ultraman World Championship at the Big Island on Hawaii. And with a finishing time of 23 hours, 22 minutes, and 58 seconds. So for those of us who are not unfamiliar with what an Ultraman is, can you talk about what it entails? And I also was wondering, you did one in Florida as a qualifier. What you're going to tell me standard fare for Ultraman? Is it always the same days and distances?
Ish. We'll get to that.
Okay.
So Ultraman is a 3-day, 320-mile multi-sport event. It is swimming, biking, and running, as is typical with a triathlon. The distances across the 3 days are: day one is a 10K swim, or 6.2 miles, and then a 91-mile bike. Day two is supposed to be a 171.4-mile bike. We had some hashtag bonus miles added to the Ultraman World Championship because there were some road closures in Hilo due to surf advisories. They closed, I guess, the beach road when there's a surf advisory, and there was crazy surf over in Hilo that day. So they had to reroute us off of the traditional course, which ended up making the bike mileage on day two 174 miles.
Oh my
So
God.
it's as with Ultraman. Ultraman is a very it's an organic event. There's not a lot of fuss and fanfare, and that's why I love it, and that's why I think people that are drawn to it love it. It's not corporate. It's there's a very laid back vibe. So that's like 171, 174. Neither here nor there, close enough,
Right.
is what the mileage is, close enough. So yes, that's day two. Then day three is a double marathon, 52.4 miles. So 3 days, 320-ish miles of swim, bike, and run.
Wow.
Wow.
So you're no stranger to triathlon, like or any of these individual sports, right? You started as an elite swimmer. You've done many, many Ironman and 12-hour time trial events. What as far as the volume of your training, how does that compare? What is the volume hour-wise per week of training for something like an Ultraman?
The training, the total hours, to be honest, weren't terribly different than my regular training volumes as a professional triathlete specializing at the Ironman distance. Our training, it's funny, when I first quit my job, March 15th, 2005 was my last day of work on Wall Street. I quit my job to start racing professionally. And when I quit, my employer very kindly offered me part-time work, which as an equity trader, I was like, who does that? Like, how's that going to work? It wasn't going to, long story short, but they did offer me part-time work. And I thought about it for a minute because I thought, there's only so much you can train. Like what am I going to do with the rest of my time? So sort of part-time work seemed like a really good idea at the time. And then I realized as soon as I quit my job and started training full-time, wow, you really can fill up a day. I mean, I think my training hours average, around 30. So I'm, right now we're early season, so we're probably in the mid 20s. On average, we're probably high 20s. And when I'm in heavy training, specific for race prep, we're just over 30, 32, 33-ish hours. My Ultraman training wasn't dreadfully different than that in terms of the hours of the week. But the breakdown of the training was much, much different. So my easier days were much, much easier, but my harder days were much, much longer. So for Ironman training, my typical long ride will be, we'll do a lot of 5 and 6 hour rides, a couple times a week. For Ultraman, that long ride was 8 hours. But that meant that my other rides during the week were somewhat a little bit shorter. So every weekend, the build up towards Ultraman, we got more and more specific so that the weekend really did mimic the setup for Ultraman. So I was doing sort of a moderately long ride on a Friday, a super long ride on a Saturday, and then a long run on the Sunday to try to replicate what we would see in the race. And I just think that's a smart way to do any of your training. I mean, anytime I'm preparing for an Ironman, I'll try to replicate the conditions on the day. If it's a very flat course, I'll stick to the flatter road. So I'm time trialing more. If it's hilly, I'll try to incorporate some climbs in the same places that we'd see them in the race. So if you see the topography of the race and there's a big climb at the end, in your training rides, do a big climb at the end of your ride. So really that's what we did. But total hours wise, we weren't that much over a little bit over, but not that much over what I would do typically for Ironman prep.
And it sounds like your swim build was similar to the bike build, like that it was, although the yardage kind of did blow my mind, like how much yardage I guess you have to for that kind of swim, but you were swimming most days a week?
Yeah, I swim. In the usual training for me is 5 to 6 days a week of swimming. We swim pretty hard as a squad. My coach, Julie Dibbins. It's funny, we finished a swim this morning. Our main set was 5 by 800, which was it was a mouthful this early in the season. And one of my training partners got out of the pool. He's new to training with our squad, and he looked at me. He's like, Julie is just brutal. And I was like, welcome to the JD crew. We swim hard. We swim a lot and we swim hard. So our typical swims are 5 to 6K for all of our squad sessions, which there's 3 of those a week. And then we'll usually do probably 2 sessions on our own that are more like 4 to 5K. And then sometimes on the Sunday after a long run, it's just an easy 1 to 2K float just to loosen up after a long run. But yeah, 5 to 6 days a week already that I swim. And for Ultraman, we just, again, once a week, I would typically swim in the wetsuit because Ultraman is a wetsuit legal swim. So I swam the 10K in a wetsuit.
In the pool?
Yeah, so I would do my training in the pool in a wetsuit. Which is dreadfully uncomfortable because it gets quite warm.
I was just thinking.
Again, it's good heat tolerance, right? It's tolerance training because, swimming in the Pacific Ocean in a wetsuit in Hawaii, you're going to get quite warm as well. So it was good practice for that. I spent quite a bit of time going back and forth between my full wetsuit and my sleeveless wetsuit. Thankfully, my wetsuit partner, DeBoer, makes a sleeveless wetsuit. There was a time I was like, I don't think I actually reached out to them. I was like, what would happen to the wetsuit if I just cut the sleeves off of it? And then they emailed me back. They're like, we make a sleeveless one if you want us to send it to you. So not a lot of people use the sleeveless because the shoulders in the DeBoer wetsuit are so, compliant anyway. So not a lot of people are interested in their sleeveless model. But for me, it was more about core temperature control. So I did a lot of my swim training for Ultraman going back and forth between the full wetsuit and the sleeveless wetsuit. So I could compare. Obviously, you lose a little bit of buoyancy with the sleeveless wetsuit, but your arms are out of the water 50% of the time anyway. So I was like, how much buoyancy am I really losing in return for a lot lower core body temperature? And for me, I found the sleeveless wetsuit was definitely the way to go. And I was very, very pleased with that choice. But yeah, so my long swim each week, I would just get in anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes early. And then that built up to where I was getting in, an hour early. So I'd be doing a nearly, 2.5 to 3 hour swim, which is what I thought I would be at Ultraman. Yeah. So we built up to doing a 10K swim in the pool.
And then did I understand correctly that your longest run, if we move to the run, was really just about 3 hours, even for this double marathon? Because I definitely would love to hear more about that, because in our audience, we have people who struggle with that element of it. The run is definitely the hardest on the body. And how do we, manage that kind of volume without beating yourself up?
Yeah. So the run is obviously where you put yourself at risk. It's the greatest injury potential, right? Because of the impact. So for me, the risk, we looked at the training in terms of risk reward, right? What is the risk of doing a 5 hour run? It's pretty high, right? So I knew I wasn't going to get up to the mileage. I was never going to run 50 miles in training. Like Ironman training, I will do marathon run days. They'll usually be split. I'll do a 20-mile run in the morning and maybe a 10K run in the evening. And I will get that mileage in. But for Ultraman, I knew I wasn't going to have a 52-mile run day. We just didn't see the benefit to running longer than 3 hours, but we supplemented it. So I did quite a bit I would do a 3 hour run outside and then come in and run on the lever, which I don't know if you're familiar with the lever. It's like an Ultra G, but it's affordable. You can put it on your own treadmill. It fits to any treadmill, and it's basically a contraption that sits on top of the treadmill, and then you wear a special pair of shorts, and there's a bungee that fits through
Wow.
the system, and so it enables you to then you tug on the bungee and you're able to offload body weight. So I could supplement. I could go run 3 hours out on the ground and then come in and run 30 to 45 minutes on the lever at reduced body weight to mitigate the pounding. So I could increase my mileage, but decrease my body weight so that the impact wasn't as hard. I also supplemented. I did a lot of eccentric running. So I would run a lot of downhill running because that sort of muscle contraction really beats up the legs. And, fortunately I live here in Boulder, Colorado. So I also supplemented with a lot of hiking. I would do a long run and go straight into a hike, for instance, so that I'm continuing to fuel, but I'm not getting the same pounding necessarily that you would with a run. And I just had to believe in it. I had done, in the beginning of 2021, I did my first 50K trail race. Definitely out of my comfort zone. I do not if there's like a grain of sand on the road, I will avoid it because I was like, oh, I'm not going off road. I don't do well on uneven pavement of any kind. I don't ride a gravel bike. I don't do any of those things. I'm a level pavement kind of girl. But I did a 50K trail race. And even for the 50K, I think my longest run was, 3 hours. So I was, and that went quite well. So I knew I didn't feel mentally or emotionally that I needed to do a 40-mile training run to ensure that I could run 52 miles. I did the work in the gym and we sort of cheated the miles doing other things to create the durability.
Yeah, and I'm curious about that strength work, because you did allude to that on Fast Talk. You talked about how you take your gym game, quote unquote, very seriously, and
Yeah.
we are a huge advocate for gym work here as well. I would love to hear how your approach to gym work has changed, like maybe since you were 40 to now, and what it looks like now.
Yeah, when I first started doing gym work, it was definitely sort of an afterthought to my training, and it was usually in the wintertime. I'm like, oh yeah, we're supposed to do gym work in the off season, so we would kind of make it up ourselves, and I would do it sort of twice a week, but there was never any rhyme or reason to it. There was never any progression with it. And while I was still living in Boston, a friend of mine introduced me to this young kid he's super enthusiastic. He's a really great strength coach. You should meet with him. And I really liked him. It was a guy by the name of Eric Kreze, who now is the strength and conditioning guru for pretty much all of Major League Baseball.
Wow.
Huge. He's incredible. He's been incredibly successful. And I think I was his second coached client. He was a 24-year-old kid at the time. And I really liked him, and I really liked the strength work. So it was so different than what I was doing swim, bike, and run. I had always done gym work back in college when I was swimming. We never took it that seriously back then either, because we were so exhausted by the time we even got to the gym that we just sort of went through the motions and checked the box. But I really liked how it made me feel. Eric's specialty was not endurance sports. He thought I was a bit of a nut job. So it was good. It was good foundational strength training, but I can't say it was specific to endurance sport. So when I moved to Boulder, I started working with a strength coach who was a lot more in tune with endurance sports. She actually left the strength coaching world to become an ICU nurse and has moved away from Boulder. But my strength coach now, a woman by the name of Kate Ligler, has worked with, she's a professional cyclist herself, and has worked with a number of professional triathletes, and she's just wonderful. I don't question anything. I just go to the gym ready to work, and she gets me, you know, what I need to get done. She writes the program, and it's progressive in nature, and it cycles through different exercises. When we were preparing for Ultraman, again, we did a lot of eccentric loading to mimic some of the work that I was doing outside of the gym. And I started that race at Ultraman the strongest version of myself I've ever been in my entire life. And that's at 52 years old, that's saying something. So I'm in the gym with Kate 3 times a week and for an hour. And then the other days, and this is where I've also, as I've gotten older, I've evolved a little bit. The days I'm not in the gym, I spend anywhere from 20 to 40 minutes doing mobility, sort of what I call prehab work. I work with a physical therapist on a proactive basis. So I don't go to the physical therapist when I'm injured. I go to the physical therapist consistently throughout the year, and we do a sort of a movement screen check-in, what's moving well, what's not moving well. He sends me home with just a handful of exercises to add to my pre-workout routine. You know, I'll spend probably 10 minutes anyway doing some, you know, pre-session mobility before bikes and run sessions. I don't do it so much before the swim, but, and then he'll just add 2 or 3 exercises to that. And then in the evening, and I know this might be controversial because I think there's mixed messages about static stretching, but it makes me feel tremendous. And so I will spend probably, again, not a lot of time, 15 to 20 minutes, just doing some basic static stretching before I go to bed. And so those are the things, sort of the extra things outside of the gym work that I've definitely upped my game. And then my strength training work has gotten more specific to multi-sport as I've grown as an athlete through my professional years as a triathlete. Yeah.
So can you share some of the, like, what some of that looks like? Are you doing heavy lifting? Are you doing like deadlifts and squats? Or, you know, what kind of exercises are you doing?
Deadlifts, trap bar deadlifts, front squats, back squats, a lot of single leg work, some stability work, some plyometric work, you know, pull-ups. Why always pull-ups? I hate pull-ups.
So do I.
Always pull-ups. You know, and everything has a sort of a counter. So if we're pressing one day, we're also pulling. And again, I don't want to sound like I'm not in tune with what I'm doing in the gym, but because I trust Kate so undeniably, I really don't even think about what I do day in and day out. I just go in ready to work, and I get in there, warm up, and we go to work.
That's cool. That's cool. And the PT, the prehab work that you're doing, is that facilitated with things? Are you using bands and rollers and that kind of thing, or is it all body work?
It's facilitated. Yeah, there's some band stuff, some rolling stuff, some just static mobility stuff. Sometimes the mobility with the band can help enhance what you can do just with your body. Yeah, so it's a little bit of everything depending on what we're working on. I mean, I use the peanut a lot for thoracic mobility and working on the spine and keeping that healthy. And then the mobile board, I use the mobile board a little bit for foot stability, strength. Yeah, so all the tools. I have quite the toolbox of PT toys.
I bet. But it's got to help. I mean, I'd read somewhere that, you know, it was 2016 that you had a string of injuries that sort of brought this to the relief that you needed to be doing more of this work. Is that correct?
Yeah, I went into 2016. I had just started working with my coach, Julie Dibbins, and I got just this bizarre string of injuries, one after another, seemingly all really unrelated. Um, and it was an extremely frustrating year because we couldn't seem to get to the bottom of it. And I started working with a doctor here in Boulder who did a lot of really expensive tests. But we really did get to the crux of it, and it was a fueling issue. I was raised as a swimmer in the 80s and 90s, and we were reminded through 3 times a week weigh-ins in front of a coach and our entire squad that lighter was always better, and it just sort of reinforced this pattern of underfueling. And even when I sort of got away from that, and I don't weigh myself now, but I think the habits were sort of set up that, oh, I don't need to eat anything because I can get away with not eating something. So, but what I've learned and what I've had to sort of overcome is that just because you can doesn't necessarily mean you should. And that for me, more fueling is a way better strategy, because fuel is absolutely the pathway to performance. So it was a combination of that, and it forced those injuries through 2016 really forced me to also look at how I move, to make sure that I am moving as efficiently as I can, right? Let's not waste energy by being inefficient. And so it also prompted this sort of inspection as to just keeping up on a regular movement screen and making sure that my body is moving the way that it's meant to move.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that. I had not known that there was a low energy availability component to that. And we see it all the time in this audience. I mean, we all sort of came up with that idea, right? That lighter is better, weigh-ins, all that stuff. It's so ingrained. And as women sort of get older, I think there is this tendency, body composition can shift, all this stuff happens, and there can be this drive to sort of eat less and fuel less. So I'm glad you shared that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't think there was any malicious intent. I think
Right, I wasn't
we,
implying that.
we as a population have gotten smarter about all of these things. I think if you look at the general population, and I'm talking, this was swimming, right? And if you look at swimmers back in the 80s and 90s, they look very different than the swimmers of today. They train very, very differently. We were very high mileage trained. We were swimming, 100,000 meter weeks in training as swimmers. And again, I think just training science evolves and you get smarter, and there's so much more focus on power and strength now as the propulsion, to make swimmers go faster, as opposed to this incredible efficiency that is developed over 100,000 K, swim weeks, right? So we would develop this stroke efficiency, and this fitness over, this overtraining our distance so tremendously. And I think they've just gotten smarter about what makes people faster.
Yeah.
So there's not malintent to it. I just think that we've gotten smarter as a population as to what the best way to be the best athlete you can be, what that is, what that equation comes out to.
Mm-hmm. So it's related to that, what does your recovery entail? I heard you, and I want people to hear this because I think it's important. The narrative, like, wow, she's broken these records and she's doing all these things, and it's like a lot goes into this, right? Like you go to bed at like 7 and you're getting sometimes 10 hours of sleep or more. Yeah, I mean, talk about your recovery practice.
Yeah, so again, it goes hand in hand with the things that I've learned that as an older athlete I have to focus on. I think when I was younger I could get away with less sleep, I could get away with, crappier nutrition, I could get away with not doing the sort of the prehab. Like I would literally wake up at, when I was an age group athlete before I started racing professionally, would wake up before work. And between the time my alarm went off and my first steps of my run was about 4 minutes of time, like literally roll out of bed, put the run clothes on, out the door, like the sun's not even up yet, I wouldn't pay attention to those sorts of things and I could get away with it. I'd finish the run and literally shower, go to work and sit at an office desk all day, not taking care of the body in the way that I feel like I have to now. So as I've gotten older, all of these things have started to play a bigger and bigger role. But now I really enjoy I enjoy paying that amount of attention, like focusing on those details, because it's leading to the performances that I want to be having. And it's keeping me in the sport, to be honest. Like I'm still able to compete because I'm willing to do all of these things, put a heightened focus on my nutrition, put a heightened focus on my strength training, my mobility, my body care, put a heightened focus on my recovery. So my recovery, I mean, again, I think like a lot of the stretching and the mobility is part of that. I take Epsom salt baths when I can. I take ice baths sometimes when that seems to feel good. I use the Normatec boots often. We'll go to sleep in the Normatec boots, and thankfully my husband doesn't like to go to bed at 7, so I fall asleep in the boots and he comes and takes me out of them before he goes to bed. It sort of works out. All of those things, they add up. The sleep, the nutrition, all of it. Luckily I love to sleep. It just makes me feel better. I've never been one that can get by on 3-4 hours of sleep. I never, literally in college, never pulled an all-nighter. I couldn't. I just couldn't. And so that sleep is really important. I don't have time. When I was in college as a swimmer, I would nap during the day. I don't have time to nap now. My days are way too full. But as a result, I still get the same amount of sleep just by going to bed early. And people make fun of me. Like my friends want to go out to dinner. I'm like, if we're not going at 5:30, I'm not going, because I need to go to bed. And I tell the athletes that I coach, I'm highly responsive to your text messages and your emails. Just don't expect a response after about 6:30 because I'm winding down and getting ready to go to bed. So yeah, I don't mind that sacrifice. There are some sacrifices I wish I didn't have to make. But sleep's definitely not one of them. I love to sleep.
And that sleep comes easy? Like you wind down and like, that's awesome.
I still, luckily, and I know as we get older that sleep can sometimes be harder to come by, less consistent. I think I worked my body so hard that by the end of the day, I'm bloody exhausted. So yeah, I do sleep well. There's some nights I get up in the middle of the night, but usually if I do, I am able to go right back to sleep. I will occasionally, if I'm having a hard time sleeping, or if I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm having a hard time going back to sleep, I will take melatonin. But yeah, for the most part, my body just craves the sleep, because that's where all that great recovery is.
It needs a lot of repair.
Yeah.
You're doing a lot.
Yeah.
So we glanced over nutrition a little bit here, but I'd like to talk obviously more about it. How has your daily nutrition evolved over the years?
Yeah, it's the frequency of fueling has increased. The variety of foods I am willing to eat has increased. I was a product of, I went to boarding school in high school. Very great school. Loved it. What a privilege. What a great opportunity. I went off kicking and screaming as if they were shipping me off to boarding school. And it really took until I was about 35 before I was willing to admit to my parents that I loved boarding school. I loved it. I didn't love the food. The food was, I don't want to say what you would expect, because now, like, I just saw my nieces over Christmas, and my oldest niece is a freshman in college, and her college dorm, she gets fed crab legs. I was like, what?
It's crazy. My nephews my daughter in college. It's nuts what they get.
I was like,
now.
The food that they eat in college is unbelievable. And I have this is also a little bit unusual. I have a beef sponsor, which people that knew me 15 years ago, because I wouldn't even eat meat 15 years ago. And now that I have a beef sponsor, they're like, what? So I work with a company called Certified Piedmontese, and it is, honest to God, the first beef I've been able to tolerate. I never liked meat. So boarding school swore me off of meat. I just never even went through the cafeteria line because the hot food just looked so sad. And I'm not a big fan of food in bulk anyway. Like, I just don't like food in bulk. I'm not a big buffet person.
Oh, I get it.
So I would migrate to the safety of the cereal bins and the salad bar, right? And so that was what I ate, and that went through all of high school, all of college, and I just wasn't fueling myself. And I'm also a picky eater. Like, even as a kid, I would only eat chicken, and my parents would try to feed me steak, and I'm like, this doesn't taste like chicken. They're like, no, it's chicken. And so I literally, like, I just shut the door on all of these foods that for taste reasons I just didn't like. And then I started getting injured, and injury after injury after injury, and performance started to suffer. And I have to say, I've worked with a ton of nutritionists throughout my careers, both as a swimmer and as a professional triathlete. And I would take little tidbits from each one of them. But it was it was right after Ultraman Florida, because my Ultraman race fueling needed an overhaul. I was set the world record at Ultraman Florida, which was really, in retrospect, quite lucky given how poor my fueling strategy was for that. So I started working with a nutritionist, and he really helped me in that. I think my struggle with some of the other nutritionists was that they were trying to sort of reinvent the way that I ate. And my nutritionist now, Andrew Dole, he's like, just making simple substitutions for things has really changed the way that I'm fueling myself for the better. And I've really changed my mindset about fueling, in that I look at it like I look at my training. I don't love track sessions. In fact, I quite despise them. But I know they're good for me. I know I have to do them to get to the goal that I want. So I suck it up. I go to the track. I adopt the best attitude that I can. And even though I'm intimidated and people are running circles around me and I feel like a fool, I go out there and I do it. It's the same thing when I sit down to dinner. My husband is a foodie. He loves to cook. Will cook me anything in the world. And I was always like, let's just have a bowl of cereal. And he's like, oh my God, who is this woman I married? But now I've just decided that it's more important for me to perform well than to have these hangups about, well, I don't like it when you cook the meat this way, or I don't like the chicken when you do this to it. Like, get over it, eat it, because it's going to make you perform better. And I'm seeing the results. So it's sort of a positive reinforcement by increasing the variety, like reintroducing chicken, just eating more varieties of foods. We started going with the meal kits, like the meals, like the HelloFresh and the Sunbasket, et cetera, et cetera. And I choose the meal. So if I don't like it, it's my own choosing. So I choose what we eat. And then this ancillary benefit is that he comes home from work and we spend 20 to 30 minutes like chopping and prepping. And it's like this little mini date night, like catching up at the end of the day. So it's been great for our relationship. It's been really good for my nutrition, because now I'm eating more variety of foods, partnering with Certified Piedmontese. I'm getting a lot more beef in my diet that I can tolerate because it's leaner, it's higher in iron, lower in fat. So eating it doesn't taste like chicken, but it settles in my stomach like chicken, in that it's not like beef used to sit so heavy in my stomach, but this is such a high quality beef that I'm able to tolerate it a lot better. So increasing the variety of foods that I'm eating in my day-to-day nutrition, fueling throughout the day, it requires a little bit more planning. And that's where Andrew was great, because I had some nutritionists that were like, oh, here's this great meal you can cook for lunch. I was like, you don't seem to understand. I'm wedging lunch into a 20-minute window between 4 workouts in the middle of the day. I'm not going to cook lunch. But Andrew, instead of saying like, oh, just eat this, bar for lunch, was like, try these, whatever, and finding the foods that I can tolerate while training in the middle of a big, training cycle in the middle of the day, but is real food and is real sustenance and isn't requiring that I cook a meal, and just making really small changes has yielded really, really big results.
Well, that's great. And are you also carrying that real food into your sports nutrition itself?
For Ultraman, I absolutely did. That was one of the biggest mistakes I made at Ultraman Florida, was that I thought I could just replicate my Ironman training plan 3 days in a row.
Hmm.
And at the time I did Ultraman Florida, I was using a product that worked well for me at Ironman, but it was all liquid nutrition. It was like a sugary sport drink. And it worked well for a single day event. It did. I had great results with it in a single day event. Across 3 days, starting probably 10K into the bike on day 2 at Ultraman Florida, I literally went to take my first sip and threw it right back up.
That is the worst feeling in the world.
Yeah. So my stomach was just rejecting the sugar. And so my crew, thankfully, one of the members of my crew was an Ultraman athlete himself, a guy named Jordan Bryden, one of my training partners, and he had won Ultraman Canada and Ultraman World in 2019. He literally they pulled into a convenience store, and he's like, this, and that. And it was literally this hodgepodge of, what can we get her to eat that she's not going to throw up, that's going to get her, the carbohydrates, the sodium, the whatever it is. And I was lucky. Like, I was really lucky at Ultraman Florida to get away with what I got away with, because I didn't have much of a nutrition plan at all. So I started working with Andrew Dole, my nutritionist now, and we not only reset sort of my daily nutrition and got me better fuel during the day from real food, but we also revamped my Ironman fueling, which is now very, very different. And with Ultraman, figured out ways to incorporate real food and a pattern of eating across essentially what is 8 hours a day across 3 days. It's a lot of calories you have to get in. And so we sort of created this ebb and flow where some hours were heavier in calories and some hours were lighter in calories, so that we could sort of ebb and flow and your stomach could, respond, and you're not jamming thousands and thousands of calories every single hour down. And it was like, I had one person on my crew, Kate Ligler actually was responsible for nutrition. She tracked everything I put in. So when I went through a fueling stop and tossed bottles, whoever I tossed the bottle to would literally measure what was left in the bottle. So she was keeping track of absolutely everything I put in. And the most unbelievable thing, even to me, I was asking for more. Both on
Wow.
day 2 and day 3, I was like, I need more. Like, I was feeling like I can take more. Like, I want more. And I was asking for more fuel, which in my life I have never done. Like, I've gotten off the bike in an Ironman and left probably 50% of my calories on the bike still. And through Ultraman, and I've trained my way up to it. But Andrew got me from taking probably maybe 60 grams of carbohydrate an hour to, across Ultraman, 3 days, getting a minimum. I think my lightest hour of Ultraman, I got 75 grams. I
That's
was getting between
amazing.
75 and 100 grams every single hour, and incorporating real foods. Some of the foods I ate, I mean, again, it's so individual, right? I mean, what works for one person is not going to work for another. But I used a lot of organic baby food and King's Hawaiian rolls.
That's
They're
a good
great because
choice.
they squish down to nothing. Like, so I could grab it from a crew member and squish it, and it would be in my hand and not be like too bulky. And then I could sort of take a bite of it, and when you add water, it literally melts in your mouth and disappears into nothing. So yeah. Day 3, I was very much Ironman nutrition based. No real food on day 3 for running. But on the bike,
Yeah.
I could tolerate quite a bit of real food.
Well, that's really great. Like that's such an and pushing that level of carb. I mean, that's what you're seeing like the world tour pro cyclists doing now. They're all just like going so high, 90 grams an hour, that kind of thing on the bike. And makes a huge difference if you can tolerate it.
Well, and I think, and here's the thing, I used to be of the mindset that's just too much for me. I'm not a big eater anyway. I can't tolerate that much. like I honestly believe if I can tolerate anybody can tolerate it. It's practicing it, and it's finding the sources that you can tolerate it. So not everyone's going to be able to take 90 grams an hour of baby food or 90
Right.
grams an hour of whatever your gel of choice, but it's finding the right product that works for you that will enable you to get to 90 grams, and what form that comes in. Is it liquid? Is it gel? Is it solid? Is it whatever? And finding that mix. But I can tell you right now, if I can do it, anybody can do it. You just got to train your gut and find the mix of products that's going to enable you to get there, and the results will absolutely happen.
That is very encouraging news. I'm curious if you find that the temperature changes that situation for you. Like, I don't, was it very hot there? And does that sort of make that harder?
I think it makes it different. It
Okay.
definitely changes whether you're going to probably want more solids or liquids. Having a crew was invaluable because every bottle I got was ice cold, right?
Mm,
Everything I got was ice cold. And yes, it's hot, it's Hawaii. Most of it, like halfway through day one, you're up high. So the temperature is actually not as bad as it is down where Ironman is run on the Queen K. But day three, we run from Hawaii back to Kona on the Ironman course. So it's
yeah, that's
hot.
hot.
Yeah, like you're on that highway in the middle of a lava field, exposed. But every single bottle was cold, ice cold, and that makes a big difference. I find in colder climates and races, it's difficult to get that many calories in drinking because you're just not thirsty because it's so cold. And that's where I find solids to be a little bit more tolerable. There's a little bit more density to some of those calories if you're taking it in solids. You don't have to take quite as much volume to get in the calories. And so when it's cold, I think the solid form calories come down a little bit easier. When it's hot, I tend to lean more on the liquids, especially if they're cold. It becomes much easier exercise.
Yeah. Do you find that your thermal regulation is challenging at all as far as like staying cool when it is like when you are in those hot temperatures, or do you have that down to a science too?
I haven't struggled with that. That hasn't been a struggle for me. I know women, when they get to a certain age, certainly, going through hormonal changes as you get older, it becomes more difficult to manage that. And you'll be like boiling hot, and 10 minutes later, you'll be freezing cold. So I have a
I've
lot of
had some
friends.
ultra runners talk about that.
Yeah. So having wardrobe options, even in training sessions, go dressed as you think you're going to be, but have options so that you can change. As I find the only issue I struggle with is that I've become less tolerant of the cold.
Hmm.
I get colder easier than I used to, but I also think that's because I'm not living in New England anymore, and I've gotten a little bit softer about my willingness to go outside in the cold. So I just don't have as much tolerance for it, honestly. But like for me, whether it's luck or whether it's whatever it is, I haven't had that experience yet. But friends of mine, again, they just come prepared with multiple options for whatever's going to show up on the day.
Yeah, that is something that Magda Boulet talked about when she runs, because she's like she does have a lot of like hot flash kind of things, and she's like, when you're running Leadville, like when you're burning up, so she just has like light layers that she just
Yep.
unzip, zip, strips, and just takes care of it.
Well, honestly, it's one thing that I learned across Ultraman, and it doesn't have to do necessarily with, thermoregulation or anything, but just be prepared for options, right? That's what I learned at Ultraman. You have your plan and you think this is how it's going to go, but you have to be flexible and adapt and have options if it doesn't go according to plan. That's just being flexible.
Yeah. So you had mentioned offline, like as you know, this is a podcast for women who many of whom are dealing with menopausal symptoms. And you had mentioned that you don't really have them and people might get annoyed with you over that. Nobody here is annoyed. But I am curious, like, where are you in your hormonal journey? I mean, do you know, are you in the transition? Are you post menopause? Is like, where are you sitting now?
Yeah, like it's obviously people come to a community looking for support and looking for camaraderie with what they're dealing with. And so when I'm like, yeah, I find when people ask me about menopause and I'm like, I haven't noticed a thing. It's not that they get angry, but they're like, well, you don't know my pain. And, like, I'm sorry, I don't know the pain. Like, I don't know. Obviously, statistically speaking, I'm 52 years old. I am somewhere in the spectrum of
Right.
menopause, but to date, I wouldn't know it. And I don't know if it's a genetic thing. I don't know. I know it hits some women way harder than others. For me, so far, I honest to God, haven't noticed a thing. Still have a regular cycle. I just hasn't, it hasn't been my struggle yet. That doesn't mean that starting tomorrow it won't be. But at the moment, I have not noticed anything different at all.
Yeah, that's a
But
fair
I
answer.
mean, it's coming. it, it comes to us all. So all I can say is for those people that are like, you don't know my pain. Well, you can laugh because you'll be through it and I'll be suffering at some point. So I'm sure. Yeah. But to this point, it just hasn't been an issue for me.
Yeah, no, that's 100% fair. I just wanted to make that clear to the people who are listening. You did say something on Fast Talk that I loved. You said age is not just a number, and
Oh,
that it's a real thing. And I get bananas when people say that. I'm like, it is not just a number. Um, I would love you to talk a bit about that because you are continuing to be like setting personal bests and making these gains. Where are those gains coming from at this point?
yeah, like you said, my number one pet peeve. People like it'll be the headline. Oh, Dede Griesbauer proving that age is just a number. I was like, no. Age is really, really real. And if I were doing the things that I was doing when I was 35 and continue to do them today, I would not be finding the success that I'm finding now at 52. And I will say that the success I'm finding at 52 is different than the success I had at 55. I'm redefining what success is for me. I've been top 10 at the Ironman World Championship 3 times. That ship has sailed. And I realized I'm never going to win the Ironman World Championship. And fortunately, when I came into the sport as a pro, I never thought I was going to. My goal was always just to see how good I can be. And so luckily for me at 52, that is still my goal. How good can I be? Can I still compete against women who are literally half my age? And can I be successful at doing that? And I'm finding ways to do it, but I'm doing it by correcting all of the things that I did wrong when I was 35, right? So paying attention to nutrition, paying attention to sleep, being militant about those details, because those little details, yeah, we give them lip service when we're in our 20s and 30s. Oh, yeah, like you think about the pyramid and all of your training and the work is down here. And then you get to the tippy top and it's the little things like nutrition and mobility and blah, 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 blah. Now that is flipped on its head. I've done the training. My engine is robust and developed. And so the training that I do continues to maintain that. But where I'm getting the most bang for the buck is in all of those little details, in the nutrition and the sleep and the mobility and the gym, and focusing on those little details to find every single ounce of performance I can, and trying to get smarter about the way that I train, instead of just doing more. Like I still do a lot, and people assume, oh, you get older, you take more recovery days, you trim back on things. No, like I am full bore training absolutely as hard as I ever have, but having to support that with all of the little details from the little tippy top of the pyramid.
That's a great way to put it. And as you've alluded to, you've built quite the support network around you. I mean, you've mentioned a coach, you've mentioned a strength coach, a nutritionist, a physical therapist. I have read that you also have a sports psychologist and a massage therapist, a husband, of course. How has this team? Oh,
Two
maybe an
Labradors.
acupuncturist.
Labradors. I
Oh,
get dog love too.
they are
Emotional support
supportive.
animals. Yes.
They are very supportive. I have had labs all my life. Um, I'm curious, has this team also built over time? Like, did you just sort of add people as you discovered, like, oh, this is a piece that I need to fill in here as you're going through your journey as a pro athlete?
A little bit. I've always had sort of a massage therapist. I've always had, well, for probably 15 years, had a strength coach. Um, I think as I've evolved as an athlete, the demands I put on those people are a little bit different. And as a result, those people have changed. Like I said, Eric Kresge, one of the most brilliant strength coaches in all of sports, just not my sport, right? So I still talk to Eric, and I still am a big, like, just so proud of all of his success. And I think he still gets a kick out of the fact that I'm still kicking at 52. Like, we have that mutual respect, but my demand for strength training got a lot more specific as I've gotten older. So I found someone to fill that role. So my team, honestly, I think in some ways it's gotten a bit smaller, and it's gotten a lot more specific in that everyone fills a very, very specific role. And my standard for excellence has increased as well. So my standard for what is required to be a part of that team is also higher. And I have a great team, from Julie to my strength coach, again, nutritionist, you mentioned it, sports psychologist, massage therapist, all of it, down the road. And again, my support at home. I mean, we mentioned my husband. This was not his journey. So when we met, I was an underworked, overpaid Wall Street trader, right? Making huge bank. And on a dime, I just flipped it and said, by the way, I'm going to quit my job and become a professional triathlete. And now I'm an overworked, underpaid professional triathlete. And he didn't necessarily sign on for that, but he has stuck with me every single step of the way. And
20 years.
Yeah, 22 year. We'll be married 23 years in May. So he would argue that we're happier and both healthier for the journey that we've made through triathlon. I think if I were still on Wall Street, I mean, I got ulcers. Like, trading stocks, it gave me ulcers. I was not healthy. I loved my job, but I wasn't healthy. So I think we're healthier for it. We're happier for it. Possibly not as wealthy for it.
Wealth is relative.
Yeah. But that support at home, and he's my teller of truth. Like, he is the first one to say, go to bed, right? It's time for you to go to bed. Like, we'll be watching a show and he's like, go to bed. I'm like, it's not over yet. He's like, go to bed. Like, he is absolutely as demanding, but also supportive on the bad days. He's like, it's a bad day. You've had him before. We've been through this. Like, again, that support at home, I cannot, express how important that has been as well.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, for what you're doing, like, it's non-negotiable to have that kind of support at home.
Yeah.
So I'm finally going to ask you, like, the most annoying question that every athlete gets. I always hated it. What's next? Everyone always asks, like, you do this amazing thing, and that's like the first thing out of their mouth. But you have mentioned that RAM sort of intrigues you, and that you are still, like, growing and learning as an athlete. So just, like, even if there's nothing next, like, what's capturing your imagination at this point?
Yeah, RAM has definitely captured my imagination. Unfortunately, if I was to put together a RAM team, two of the people that I'd want on my RAM team are part of my team right now, and that's my strength coach, Kate Ligler, and my coach, Julie Dibbins. They were both on my crew at Ultraman. So if we were to do RAM, we have to break in an entirely new crew.
Yep.
And crewing is literally, it's way harder than doing the race itself.
Friend of mine does it. It looks so hard. I can't even.
It's very, very demanding. And so, I'd love to do RAM. It's also, like Ultraman, it's frightfully expensive. So it's a project that I have in the back of my mind. But for this year, I gave a lot of thought to the fact that after Ultraman, if I won and things went my way, that I might just drop the mic and say, peace out. This has been an awesome career, and I'm going out on top as a world champion. But during all of those hours of sort of solo training and preparation for Ultraman, I started thinking a little bit about, well, what is there left to chase? As I said, I'm not going to win Kona. I'm probably not going to win another Ironman in my career. What still gets you fired up that makes you sort of lift an eyebrow and say, that's an interesting idea? And I have long wanted sort of one more swing at Kona, not because I think I'm going to win it and not because I think I'm going to be in the top 10, but because I'm 52 years old and I'm curious to see if I could even qualify for the darn thing. So my coach, Julie Dibbins, has brought on, I just call him Science Guy, but he's helping us be a little bit more specific. And like I said, be a little bit smarter in our training. Julie does everything right. I have never, when I have faltered in my career, it's because mistakes I've made. Julie always gets me to a starting line prepared. And I have the utmost confidence in her. And so this edition of Science Guy, I think, is just going to make that a little bit better. And it made me sort of go, let's just give this another swing and see if we can't get a qualifying slot, because at 52 years old, no one's ever done it. And that would fire me up just to get a chance to toe the line with women who are half my age and to be able to say, look at what is possible. And it may not be possible, but that's what makes it a goal, right? If I knew 100% that it was possible, it's just a thing I'm going to do instead of a goal. So I kind of set that goal and we decided it was worth the investment, and we'll see if it pans out.
That's really exciting. And I know that you're not going to say a whole lot about what Science Guy is looking at, but like, what can you or will you say about what Science Guy is looking at? I know we don't want to like open up the secret box so much, but
he's just making us accountable for the work that we're doing and making sure that it's precise and specific. And we're learning a lot in the process. I mean, it's only been, what's the date today? It's January 19th. It's been 3 weeks and I've already learned a lot. And I just can't imagine how much more I have to learn. So there's that benefit too, is that if it doesn't work out, I've also learned a tremendous amount in the journey. And that's, to me, that's the good stuff, right? Like, I'll be better for it. So whether or not it happens, it may not happen. Quite frankly, I don't know that it will. I mean, the level of women's racing is incredible. So I don't know if it's possible, but it's worth a shot. And the worst thing that happens is that I'm smarter for it.
It's not a bad trade-off.
Yeah, it's okay. It's worth it for me.
Is there anything that we have not talked about that you thought would be a good message for this audience, who are all aspirational and chasing things, and still want to be making gains and being their best selves?
Yeah, like I said this at Ultraman, at awards that night. Every athlete, it's a pretty cool thing about Ultraman, every athlete's given 3 minutes, whether they are an official finisher or not. Everyone gets the mic for 3 minutes.
That's cool.
They're strict about the 3 minutes, by the way. So if you're in the middle of a sentence and you get to 3 minutes, they literally pull the mic out of your hand. But my message to that crew, I'm 52 years old. I've been an athlete for 48 of those 52 years. I was a swimmer, and then I was a professional triathlete. And at 52 years old, I finally get to say that I'm a world champion. So I think it's important to not put a timeline on your goals and dreams. You can still achieve them. It might just take longer than you thought, but if the will is there, there's absolutely a way to get it. But there shouldn't be a timeline or a deadline or an expiration date. If I put an expiration date on my goals, I never would have achieved them, because people told me 10 years ago I should quit and retire. I just refused to listen and saw a reason to keep going. And now I finally get to say at 52, I'm a world champion. And that's something.
Well, that's our show. Come on back next week when I sit down with the amazing and dynamic Juliet Starrett. Juliet is CEO of the Ready State, which she co-founded with her husband, Dr. Kelly Starrett, who is a pioneer in science and the practice of mobility, and is still the only man I have had on the show. She and Kelly have a new book out called Built to Move: The 10 Essential Habits to Help You Move Freely and Live Fully. This was an amazing conversation. We talk about hippo attacks and much more. I really loved it. So come on back for that one. And until then, as always, stay feisty. You've been listening to Hit Play, Not Pause, a feisty menopause podcast for active, performance-minded women. I'm your host, Celine Yeager. The show is edited and produced by the strong, talented, and amazing women at Live Feisty Media. Follow us on social media at Feisty Menopause, and please help us spread the word. Screenshot and share this episode on your social media channels with the tag @FeistyMenopause. Share the show with your friends, and please subscribe, like, review, and rate this show wherever you get your podcasts. Word of mouth and good reviews make it easier for other listeners to find. Thanks for listening, and as always, stay feisty.